Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone. Happy Config Day 2, and thank you for being here. Today, I'm excited to talk about design in the 10x engineering era and also how to elevate craft and quality while we're at it. Can I go back one slide? I think I got a little too eager. There we go. Cool. So before we get started, would love to introduce myself. My name is Andy Zhang. I currently lead design engineering at Google Anti-Gravity. So if you're not familiar, Anti-Gravity is a agentic development platform allowing you to manage agents, build software, automate workflows, and we also have an IDE to get closer with code, and also a CLI to manage agents in your terminal. Now, as a design engineering lead, I spend most of my time lifting the design floor and defining processes to create the best designs possible so that when we ship to our users, we're really proud of how the user experience is and how it feels. In the past, I was a PM, I was a designer, and I was also an engineer. I studied software engineering at the University of Waterloo and had the pleasure of interning at many wonderful places, one of which is Figma before they launched. So for me, it's a really, really cool experience to be on the stage 10 years later. It's a full circle moment. And this is a photo of me wearing my Figma sweater back in the days. Anyways, let's talk a bit about design. So I used to be the only engineer and designer at a startup. And while there, my goal as a designer and engineer, in other words, maybe a design engineer, was to figure out how to build and design the best possible product and experience. And some days I would spend my time designing mockups and sharing them with users and gathering feedback. Other days, I would be getting really deep in the code and writing everything by hand, and then sharing it with the co-founders and trying to figure out, like, hey, is this the right direction or not? And through it all, I explored the full gamut of a lot of the tools in the design process. And given that time and money were top of mind constraints for us as a small startup, I decided, as a visual person, I got to plot everything, and I put two axes like time and cost. So the top quadrant is like things that are very, very quick to do, and the bottom is time consuming. On the very right-hand side, you have the cheap things, and then on the left side, you have expensive. And each of these tools helped answer a very specific question with the purpose of figuring out what is the right design. Now, unfortunately, as you can tell over here, there aren't that many tools that can allow me to quickly verify my ideas, whether they were great or not, and whether a design solution was the right one. Yes, I can point inspirations. Maybe I can do napkin drawing or whiteboard, but it's not it's a little too in the imagination, and there weren't things that can really concretely give me the confidence. So I think you guys all know where this is going, but we now have AI in the mix, and suddenly there's a new player inside of the quick quadrant on the top. So there's big models on the left, there's also fast models on the top right, and you might be familiar with some. And now suddenly, it's amazing because it's democratized the magic of code. And suddenly anybody can bring an idea to life by creating code through an agent. Now, the important thing here is that while this is a really great gateway for designers to ship more code, I think there's something to be said about how this can be used to elevate design quality. The reason is because now that code is cheap, prototypes can be created quicker than ever, with a purpose, of course. You always want to have a lot of purpose in what you do. And that purpose, in the pursuit of greater design, is to answer the big design questions. Should you be using a hamburger menu or tabs? Should you be using a nested dropdown or a modal? Or should you be using a sidebar or a header? Should it be blue or should it be green? Should we be using box shadows or borders? Or should we be using glass or not? Etc. You get the point. And so answering one of these questions may be quite trivial, but when we think about quality in our designs, it comes from the accumulation of many, many great decisions. And now we have the best possible tools for accumulating those great decisions. Why? Because prototypes are recyclable. So let me share a quick story about this. In one of my past jobs, we went through a design process to figure out a 0 to 1 project. We did user research interviews, I did low-fidelity mockups, I did high-fidelity mockups, and we were ready for the next big phase, prototyping. This is all pre-AI, of course. And I was responsible for putting together this prototype very late at night. Or not very late at night, but I spent many late nights working on this to present to the CEO. So then the presentation came. The good news was that the CEO loved it. He was like, let's greenlight this. I love this. This is great. Here's all my thoughts on the prototype. Let's go ahead and do it. But the bad news is that the prototype is like no longer useful, and I spent all those late nights and being like, was it just to get a yes or no, or here's what I think, and that's it? And the code had to just be rebuilt from scratch. Now, what would have been amazing to have is, other than the speed of AI, is a way for me to recycle my prototype and all the learnings that we had, because the next iteration happened to start code from scratch, and it left a lot of room for these learnings to be lost in translation. So you might be wondering, how do you recycle? You can recycle by reusing the same agent now, and have the agents reference your past work and understand all of the learnings that's embedded inside of the code. And that way you'll never have to start from scratch again. So we have this superpower with recycling prototypes. What does this enable? The amazing thing now with agents is that it not only reduces the time to fully build a functioning prototype, but you can always recycle it, gather more feedback, which really helps you get a greater design ceiling. So you might iterate, do all these different directions, and you're like, OK, I feel ready to share this with the world. And then you cross that line, you're like, OK, I'm going to go and share this. You get all this feedback and kind of rinse and repeat that process. And maybe it happens locally. Maybe you're doing this off of an isolated environment, or maybe this is off of prod but gated, and we'll get to that later. So the thing, though, is that it did introduce a bit of a dilemma when agents were introduced. If you're able to do something faster, when you think about it, it actually opens up two major options. The first one is that you can launch earlier, which is great. Like, we all love launching earlier. It's great. And if your goal is to launch earlier, great. Like, love being ambitious with timelines. But if your goal is to create high-quality experiences, I think this is a really good opportunity for us to figure out, like, how can we use speed to elevate quality instead of launching earlier? Now, for us at Google Anti-Gravity, we relentlessly dogfood our product. And I spent a lot of my time shaping the product development and design process so that we can improve our features internally, and most importantly, without breaking external behavior. So what we do is we have a very active dogfooding channel to gather feedback on the product. And we'll build something out, we'll prototype it, put it internally so that everyone inside the team can use it. And then because our dogfooding channel is very active, we'll gather feedback, we'll go ahead and fix it, try to make some small design tweaks, or maybe we realize it's not the right direction and we scrap it. But if something really feels promising, that's when we feel like the feature can be gradually promoted. So we start off in our team, and then we graduate to maybe larger and larger groups of Google, all the way to the rest of Google. And once we feel like it's really good, that's when we feel comfortable to launch it for the world to use. And this leads to my last point about prototyping. I think prototypes are so much fun. And hopefully a lot of you guys think that too. A lot of our best work also comes from when we're having the most fun. And I think so much of the fun in prototyping comes from curiosity and like imagination and a lot of what ifs and what about this, what about that. And so many of these amazing questions are all answerable now with prototypes, and it's very practical to answer them because you can prototype so quickly. Cool, so let's talk about a couple of starting points for how you should think about prototyping, because there are many, many starting points. When you're trying to figure out a way to improve your design via prototyping, there isn't always the best answer, because each of these starting points answer the question differently. So as an example, if you have this really blue sky creative idea, such as like, what would this crazy animation look? How would that feel? Maybe starting from scratch is a better idea for these conceptual questions. Or if you want to reuse existing building blocks but still want to remain experimental, maybe you should invest in a playground that's isolated from production. Or if you really want to get as close to production code as possible and really see how do users use this, but in a gated way, then maybe you should be forking off production code. Let's go through each of these, and I'll share a couple of examples with each. If you're starting from scratch, the beauty of this is that anything can be a starting point. And it doesn't have to be a website. I think there's a lot of really great vibe-coded websites out there, but I think that the world is bigger than that, and I think that we can think about ideas such as integrating with existing products like Figma. So obviously, I've been a huge fan of Figma since I interned there, and one of the things that got me into design is I'm much more of a visual person. And I was wondering, like, what if your agents could interact with you in a visual diagram? So what I decided to do was quickly prototype a way to sync my agent's diagrams into FigJam. And in a matter of minutes, I was finally able to answer some of the big questions on my mind, like, how do I bake bread? Or how does rain work in the jungle? Random questions like that. And instead of getting long paragraphs of responses that don't fit me very well, I was like, okay, I want to be able to visualize a lot of this, and suddenly I can visualize this, and then if I wanted to go bake bread, I can suddenly remember that diagram. I'm like, okay, great, I know how to do this now. Another cool idea, and this was one of my favorite ideas, is that I am really fascinated about many of the different ways that people communicate, and I find that texting can sometimes be restrictive. Like, you get a text and you can just read the entire thing, and can we do more than that? So one thing I was wondering was, how can I bring more life to words while texting? Could the rhythm of someone's typing carry more life alongside its words? So I decided I want to build a prototype of this, where instead of sending a text to somebody, I can send the individual typing actions while preserving the timing. So I went ahead and prototyped this and then tried it out. And I sent a message and then watched how the prototype sent the text back to me. And as I saw the characters slowly reveal themselves, I was like, wow, this is like really giving Harry Potter texting vibes, and like it's like super cool. And then I started playing with it an entire Friday evening, and I thought it was super fun. And I was writing to myself. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I thought that this was a way more fun way to be reading full text compared to having text that doesn't have a rhythm in it. And in some ways, while playing around with this, I actually learned a lot about myself because I realized I was a much slower typer than I thought. The second type of prototyping the second type of prototyping happens in these dedicated, isolated playgrounds. Now, these playgrounds allow builders to start at a baseline quality and provides these building blocks for your prototype. Now, I've seen many great companies put together these prototyping playgrounds. For example, many of these over here, and these are great for designers and developers to play with. So for us within Anti-Gravity, we allocate time every 2 weeks to prototype new ideas, to really explore the capability of agents and to go kind of wild with ideas, so that way we can see like, oh, maybe this is a really great, promising thing. Let's go ahead and explore that. So many of my favorite companies invest in a way for you to explore, and you should probably do it too. So one example that I love is that Brian Lovin from Notion created a prototype playground for builders to safely explore ideas without breaking production. He set up a deploy skill so that you can easily deploy your changes, and also a brainstorm skill for a lot of new ideas, and a sub-agent so that you can sync your work to a Figma design, and so that it can work to make sure it matches that design. And so I think these skills are really great for accelerating your prototyping velocity and gathering feedback and getting a sense of whether this is the right direction to pursue or not. So if you don't have a prototyping playground, I'd highly encourage investing in one to bridge the gap between prototypes and to gather feedback and to make sure you can maximize the number of iterations on your product. I think that the last thing is that those extra iterations might be the feedback you need to get the differentiator that you're missing. Lastly, prototyping off of production is a great way to start from the ceiling of your product. Production should already have the best version of your product, hopefully. And it typically does require a bit of setup to do this if you want to prototype off of production. So as an example, you gotta get your dev environment running, and you get all the credentials, you have to connect to the right data, you gotta make sure you're not screwing up prod data. But if you're able to get all that set up, and then you're suddenly able to make it feel better off of production, then doesn't that basically mean you elevate the ceiling of production's design, or the design of production? And if you did that, then that's amazing. Like, that's what we want to see, right? Making products feel better. Obviously, there's a risk here, which is that if you work in production, you can have side effects on your users since they are using production. So you need to invest in a good way to gate this internally. Or you need to have the proper guardrails to make sure that it avoids regression. Or lastly, you can recycle this prototype and hand it off to an engineer, and they can basically reuse this, unlike what I could have done before, and basically figure out a way to ship this without regressing production. So for us and Anti-Gravity, the state of it is an accumulation of many of these prototypes that graduated. And it's graduated into something that our team is proud to share. But I thought I'd share one concept where I thought it was like super cool, and I was like, oh, like maybe this is the future of how you interact with it, and this is all in my mind. But then I was like, okay, like to really have conviction, I need to be able to test this out. So for one of my prototyping days, I wanted to know if interacting with agents inside of anti-gravity would be better via an interactive graph as opposed to linear text. And it's very similar to the FigJam prototype I shared earlier. So I wanted to be able to look at this graph, be able to like click on different nodes and like the edges and comment on them. And so for example, if there was like one part of the screen connecting to another part of the screen, I want to be able to comment on the edge saying like, oh, make this animation faster. That's kind of the gist of the idea. And so I prototyped it out, I built it, and I was like, oh, this is like super cool. But then I had to ask myself the real questions, which is, would I actually use this? And the answer was no. So I was like, okay, let's just abandon this and spend my time elsewhere. Cool. Now, this leads to my first lesson from prototyping a ton in the last 10 years. Just because the interactive graph worked and it was cool, it doesn't mean that it should be shipped, because I think that good design comes from great curation. And ultimately, if you want to control for quality, most code should just not make it to the user. And many might forever stay in dogfooding, many might not even make it into dogfooding. But ultimately, to ship an amazing product, only the best features should be graduating. Agents have also made code really cheap, but that should not be a reason to ship more. Instead, we should be thinking about how to use that as an accelerant to gather more feedback, and then graduating them to the world once they've reached that bar that we really strive for. Now, thanks to AI, it's more practical than ever to prototype. And I think that AI is incredible at understanding your ideas and visualizing your vision. And prototyping unlocks a level of feedback that previously wasn't practical to get. And the reason why is because the feedback that you get visualizing a flow is different than the feedback you get when you feel a flow. And previously, there's a very, very high cost to building that prototype to feel the flow. But now that's really cheap. Suddenly, you can ask anybody, hey, how does this feel, very, very cheaply. Unlocking this capability does require work, though. And it usually comes in the form of a gated way for designers and developers to test their ideas and gather feedback before shipping them. With the right environment, the learnings from your prototype gives you the conviction you need to push the idea forward, or maybe decide to abandon your idea for something even better, similar to how I abandoned the interactive agent in the graph idea. Now, if you're wondering if you have a great prototyping process, ask yourself this. How much of your building blocks are reusable? Can you set it up very, very quickly? Is it easy for you to gather feedback? Is it easier for you to gather feedback, update it, and gather more feedback? Do you have any skills to make the process faster using agents? So it's no longer enough to just have a way for you to prototype, but instead you should be actively investing in one. And what makes a really great prototyping environment is the speed at which you can go from idea to many of these iterations. And that's because quality doesn't come from just coming up with one right idea, but it's about trying and recycling hundreds of previous prototypes and feeling confident that this last prototype was better than all the other ones. So the last learning is that the tools are only as powerful as your vision, craft, and understanding. When I think back on my proudest projects from the past, the common thread that I found was that I had a really intimate understanding of the work which came from repeated feedback. It never came from one brilliant idea or because I managed to get an agent to one-shot it, but instead it was because I really understood who I was building for and I got there because I repeatedly gathered a lot of feedback before sharing it with the world. Now, pre-AI, of course, this process took months to happen, and with all those iterations. But now we're seeing iterations happen and rounds of learnings happening within days, which is incredible. So, if there's one thing you take away from this talk, it's that to really elevate your designs, you do need to invest and not just passively have a good agentic prototyping process to accelerate the speed of your learnings. And yes, agents are great at writing production code, and yes, it's great for production designs, but the most important thing to elevate the craft of your work is learnings you get to answer the why and the why not. At the end of the day, design quality isn't measured by how much you ship or how close you are to production code. It's measured by which version you said yes to and what of the many versions you said no to. And you can only really decide which one you decide to say yes to if you learn from the feedback. Most importantly, you can't let AI decide something if it cannot verify, because AI and your users are different. So if you don't have a good prototyping process, then you don't have a good compass for finding design quality. But if we combine a great prototyping process with the patience to do more iterations, only then will it be very clear which design is the best out of the hundreds of thousands of other alternatives to make a great user experience for your product. Thank you.